Hey there, good people. My name is Scott, and you are watching Sword and Shield Studio. Right now, we're going to learn how to create pop-up text animation for your videos that look something like this. Now, in order to create this, you will need DaVinci Resolve 17 or later, because it utilizes the Anim Curves modifier, which you can learn more about in the video linked above. Linked below in the video description is the final project file for this particular animation we're putting together today. Additionally, I've included a couple sounds that I downloaded from freesound.org. If you use these in your own work, just be sure to attribute the original recording artists. With that in mind, let's get right into it. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is navigate to the Fusion tab in Resolve, where we are now, and right-click the open space in your media pool, and from the drop-down menu, hit New Fusion Composition. And you can set your Fusion composition to whatever duration and frame rate you like. I'm just going to keep mine at the default 5-second duration at a frame rate of 60 FPS, which is what my project is set as. And hit create. Next, double click the Fusion composition to open it. And you should see a MediaOut node in your node tree at the bottom here now. Next, add a background node to your node tree by hitting Shift Space on your keyboard and type BG and hit Enter. And with your background node still selected, hit Shift Space again and type TXT and hit Enter when you're hovered over the Text Plus node. And you'll see Fusion has automatically added a merge node and merged our Text Plus and background nodes together here, which is pretty nice. Connect your merge node to the MediaOut node, and once you do that, you should see a completely black composition at the top in your viewer here. Left click your background node to select it and bring down the alpha value all the way to make that black background a completely transparent background instead. Next, left click the Text Plus node and type what you would like your pop-up text to say in the text section in your inspector. I'm just going to type pop-up here, change the styling how you would like, and position the text in your viewer generally where you want it to appear on the screen. If you want to more accurately position the text at this point, you can go to your media pool and drag in the footage that you're ultimately going to lay this text above onto your node tree and hook it up to your merge instead of the background node. And you can, in your inspector, adjust the trim points here until you've got a generally good sample of your footage where you're going to put this text above. The next step is to left click our Text Plus node to make it active and right click the keyframe icon to the right of our size value for our Text Plus node in the inspector. And from the drop down menu, go to Modify With and hit Anim Curves. You'll see this has caused our text to scale up to be rather large over the course of the entire composition here. That's because of the default values in the Anim Curves modifier, which we can change by going to the top of the inspector and hitting Modifiers. Scrub to the very end of the composition now and adjust the scale value just above what you want the maximum size of your pop-up text to be while it's static on the screen. Once you've got the scale figured out, you can reconnect the background node and delete the media in node that you brought into your node tree. Now you'll see the text scales up to the value we want it over the entire course of the composition, because the animation curve is set to linear. This is not exactly the behavior that we want, but we can change that. We want the text to quickly pop up at the beginning of the animation, remain at the same scale for a time, and then pop out at the very end. So in order to do this, we'll have to create a custom animation curve that reflects this behavior. So left click the text plus node on the node tree to make it active. Go to the Modifiers tab at the top of the inspector to open the Anim Curves modifier again. And under where it says curve shape and curve, change it from linear to a custom curve. And here you will see a graphical representation of our linear curve that we had, where the scale starts at 0 and over the course of the entire composition raises to a value of 1.0. You can left click this curve to add a control point onto it, and hold left click and drag this control point to somewhere in the very beginning, about 0.03-ish, and you can hold control and use a scroll wheel to zoom in to get a more detailed view of this. And then add another control point close to the one we just created. Very close actually. And hold left click and drag, zoom out and hold left click and box select that second control point and the control point at the very end of the animation, and drag both of these down just a bit. And the reason I'm doing this is so that the text pops up to the maximum value, which is going to be just a bit larger than what we ultimately want it to show up as, and then it remains at a slightly smaller scale for the rest of the animation. And I'll actually bring this a bit closer so that pops down faster, and we'll play this back, see how it looks. Okay, good. See, it pops up and then scales down slightly at the end, and then remains at that slightly less than maximum value until the very end of the animation curve. And we can smooth this out a bit by zooming in close here to our animation curve. Left click our control point and drag our handle. Where is our handle? Can drag our left handle about even with the line up here so that it scales up slower as it approaches this maximum value. And we could do the same thing for our second control point and just create a smooth animation curve. And you could play around with the handles how you like and adjust this however you like. And we'll play this back, and you see we've created a nice smooth little pop-up effect. Now we want this to pop out at the very end of the animation too. So in order to do that, all we have to do is check the mirror option under our custom curve here. And you'll see as I play this back, it pops in at the very beginning, remains at that close to maximum value throughout the animation, and then pops out at the very end. Okay, so I'm on the edit page now in Resolve, where I have dragged the fusion composition we just created onto a video track 2, and then I dragged the raw footage I was going to overlay the pop-up text above onto video track 1. And if we play this back, we could see our animation in action. And you see that looks pretty nice. It pops in and out. Now we can add a little bit more production value to this by adding some sound effects. So I'm going to dim my audio so it's not so loud, and bring in a couple sound effects that I downloaded, like this pop sound effect. Just going to drag it to the very beginning of the animation here. You see that lines up nicely. Just a little added fun pop effect. I'm going to hold left click and drag these handles at the end of my clip to fade in and out that audio so it's not so jarring. And then I'm going to bring in this whoosh sound effect. I'm just going to line up the loudest part of the waveform with the very end of that composition. See how that works. Okay, good. Just a little subtle whoosh effect. And I'm going to fade in and out that as well. Maybe bring down the audio a little bit. Cool. Another thing you can do to add production value to this, if you right click and open the composition in the Fusion page from the drop down menu, go ahead and left click the Text Plus node and go to the Shading tab within your inspector for the Text Plus node. You can select from this drop down menu the shading element 3, which is a black shadow, little drop shadow effect, and left click enabled here. And we could see it's pretty intense drop shadow effect, which you may like, but I like it to be a bit more subtle, so I'm going to bring down the alpha value to about 0.24-ish and bring up the softness just so it's a subtle shadow effect that makes the text pop out a bit more. And then the last thing you can do is add some motion blur by going to the Settings tab in the Text Plus node and checking the motion blur option here. And you'll see as this pops up, we've got a nice blur. Now it kind of repeats the image at the lower quality here, so if you're just previewing this, that's fine. But for final render, I recommend going up to at least 8 for the quality, so it better blends in that effect. So that does it for this tutorial. I hope that after watching this video you learned a little bit about how pop-up text works in Resolve and how you can use the Anim Curves modifier to create similar adaptable graphics for your own projects. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel where I upload a video just like this one every week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.